The rain fell in sheets that night, pounding against the windshield of Marcus Harrington's Bentley as he took the wrong exit off the highway. A simple navigation error that would change 4 lives forever. If you've ever wondered whether fate exists, whether a single moment can rewrite destinies, stay with me until the end of this story. I promise you'll never look at a bridge the same way again. If this story touches your heart, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Your support helps us continue sharing these moments that might otherwise be lost in the noise of our busy world. Marcus hadn't always been wealthy. At 42, his salt and pepper hair and tailored suits projected success, but they concealed years of struggle and sacrifice. The tech company he'd built from his garage had finally gone public last year, transforming him overnight from comfortable to obscenely wealthy. The money brought freedom but also a hollowness he couldn't explain, a void that his penthouse, sports cars, and investment portfolio couldn't fill. That rainy Tuesday night, Marcus was returning from a charity gala where he donated a sum that had earned him applause but left him feeling strangely empty. The navigation system in his car malfunctioned, directing him toward an industrial area he'd never visited before. As he approached an old steel bridge spanning a narrow river, something caught his eye. A flicker of light beneath the structure. Marcus slowed his car, curiosity overriding his usual caution. He should have continued home. He had meetings in the morning, emails to answer. Instead, he pulled over, grabbed his umbrella, and stepped into the downpour. The muddy slope leading under the bridge was treacherous. His Italian leather shoes sank into the muck as he carefully made his way down. The light grew stronger, a small camping lantern illuminating what appeared to be a makeshift home. Tarps had been strategically hung to block the wind. Plastic crates served as furniture, and huddled together on a collection of flattened cardboard boxes were 3 figures. "Hello?" Marcus called out, suddenly aware of how intrusive his presence might seem. The man looked up first, mid-30s perhaps, with a weathered face that suggested he'd aged beyond his years. Beside him sat a woman of similar age, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her eyes wary but not unkind. Between them, wrapped in what appeared to be several layers of clothing and a sleeping bag, was a small boy, no more than 7 or 8. "Can we help you?" the man asked, his voice surprisingly steady, dignified even in these surroundings. I saw your light." Marcus stammered, feeling foolish now. "I thought someone might need help." The man and woman exchanged glances. "We're managing," the woman said softly. The boy coughed, then, a deep, rattling sound that seemed to shake his small frame. The woman immediately turned her attention to him, placing a hand on his forehead. "He's burning up, David," she whispered to the man. Marcus stood frozen, rainwater dripping from his expensive umbrella onto his shoes. He'd donated millions to children's charities. He sat on the board of a homeless outreach program. Yet here, faced with the reality of a sick child sheltering under a bridge, he felt utterly helpless. "He needs a doctor," Marcus said, finding his voice again. "We know," David replied, a hint of frustration in his tone. "We've been saving for antibiotics, but the shelter was full tonight, and with this rain." "I have a car," Marcus offered. "I can take you to a hospital." Another exchange of glances between the adults. Trust didn't come easily when you lived under a bridge. "I'm Sarah," the woman finally said. "This is David and his son Ethan." "Marcus," he replied, deliberately omitting his last name, which might have been recognized. That night changed everything. Marcus drove them to a private hospital where his substantial donation the previous year ensured Ethan received immediate care for his pneumonia. While the boy was treated, Marcus learned their story over styrofoam cups of hospital coffee. David had been a construction worker until a workplace accident left him with a back injury. Without health insurance, medical bills mounted. His wife had left shortly after, unable to cope with their declining circumstances. Sarah had been their neighbor, a kindergarten teacher who'd grown close to Ethan. When David and Ethan were evicted, Sarah had offered her apartment, but 3 months later, her school closed due to budget cuts. Without income, they'd lost her apartment too. "We've been under that bridge for 17 days, David explained, his voice matter of fact devoid of self-pity. "Sarah could have gone to her sisters in Ohio, but she wouldn't leave us." Sarah shrugged, embarrassed by the implied praise. "Ethan needs stability, and David's been applying for jobs every day at the library. Something will come through." Their resilience humbled Marcus. Here were people who had lost everything except their dignity and their care for each other. He'd been raised to believe that poverty was usually the result of poor choices, but David and Sarah defied those assumptions. They were hardworking, intelligent people caught in circumstances beyond their control. When Ethan was discharged the next morning, Marcus made an impulsive offer. He owned several properties across the city, including a small two-bedroom apartment that had been sitting vacant. "It's nothing special," he explained, "but it's furnished and available. You could stay there while you get back on your feet. No rent for the first 3 months." The offer was met with suspicion at first. People didn't just give away apartments to strangers they'd met under bridges. But Ethan's need for recovery in a stable environment eventually overcame their hesitation. The apartment was in a modest neighborhood, clean and functional if not luxurious. Marcus had purchased the building as an investment and rarely visited it. Watching Sarah's eyes fill with tears as she ran her hand over the kitchen counter, he felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and shame. Such a simple thing, a roof, walls, running water, yet it represented an unattainable luxury to them. "We'll pay you back," David insisted, his pride evident. "Every cent." Marcus nodded, respecting the man's need to maintain his dignity. "I know you will." What Marcus hadn't planned was becoming involved in their lives beyond providing shelter. He'd intended to be a distant benefactor, checking in occasionally to ensure they were managing. But Ethan had other ideas. The boy, recovering quickly with proper medication and nutrition, was fascinated by Marcus's car and his stories about technology. During one visit, he asked innocently, "Can you stay for dinner? Sarah's making spaghetti, and it's the best." Marcus found himself accepting, surprised by his own eagerness. The meal was indeed excellent, served on mismatched plates in the small dining area. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by Ethan's enthusiastic questions and observations. For the first time in years, Marcus felt present, engaged not because of what he could offer, but simply for who he was. These dinners became a weekly occurrence. Marcus learned that Sarah had a talent for cooking and a passion for early childhood education. David revealed an aptitude for woodworking, a hobby he'd pursued before his injury. Ethan showed remarkable intelligence and curiosity, devouring books from the local library. Marcus found himself looking forward to these evenings more than the high-profile events that filled his calendar. In the small apartment, there were no expectations, no networking opportunities, no subtle competitions of wealth and status. There was only genuine conversation, simple food, and a warmth he hadn't experienced since before his company's success had isolated him in a bubble of privilege. 2 months into this arrangement, Marcus offered David a job. His company needed a facilities manager for their new office building, someone practical who could oversee maintenance and repairs. "I don't have the qualifications," David protested. "You have exactly the qualifications," Marcus countered. "You understand construction, you're meticulous, and you have common sense. The rest you can learn." David accepted with a handshake that conveyed both gratitude and determination. Within weeks, he proved himself invaluable, identifying cost-saving measures and improving systems that more credentialed managers had overlooked. Sarah's path took longer to define. She continued to search for teaching positions, but the market was competitive. During one dinner, she mentioned her dream of opening a press school that would be accessible to working families of all income levels. "What's stopping you?" Marcus asked. "Reality," she laughed. "Licensing, location, insurance, staff, curriculum development. Dreams are free, press schools aren't." Marcus found himself thinking about her vision long after dinner ended. His company had recently established a foundation focused on education initiatives. A press school aligned perfectly with their mission, and Sarah's passion and experience made her an ideal director. When he proposed the partnership, the foundation would provide startup funding while Sarah would develop and lead the program. She initially refused. "I don't want charity," she explained during a tense conversation in the apartment's small living room after Ethan had gone to bed. "It's not charity," Marcus insisted. "It's investment in a social enterprise with potential returns both financial and societal. The foundation would do this regardless. The only difference is we have access to someone with the exact expertise and vision we need." David, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. "Sarah, remember what you told me when you first offered to share your apartment? That accepting help when it's offered isn't weakness, it's giving someone else the opportunity to do good." Sarah's resistance crumbled then, replaced by cautious excitement. Within 6 months, Bright Beginnings Preschool opened its doors in a renovated building near several underserved neighborhoods. The sliding scale tuition model ensured accessibility, while the innovative curriculum quickly attracted families from diverse backgrounds. As David and Sarah established themselves professionally, their relationship with Marcus evolved. He was no longer just a benefactor but a friend, confident, and regular presence in their lives. Ethan, now thriving in school, looked forward to their weekend outings, museums, ball games, hiking trails Marcus had never explored despite living in the city for decades. For Marcus, these relationships filled the void that success had created. His massive house no longer echoed with emptiness when he returned from work. Often, he would join the three of them for dinner at their apartment, which they now rented legitimately. Sometimes, they would visit his home, Ethan marveling at the swimming pool while David and Sarah teased Marcus about his minimalist decorating style. "This place needs a family," Sarah remarked once, then blushed at the implication. The comment lingered in Marcus's mind. At 43, he had achieved extraordinary professional success, but had always considered his personal life a secondary priority. Dating had been sporadic and superficial, often limited to women who were attracted to his wealth and status rather than interested in knowing the man beneath. Sarah was different. Her kindness wasn't performative. Her intelligence wasn't wielded as a weapon. She challenged him, disagreed with him, called him out when his privilege blinded him to realities others faced. And somewhere between those early hospital coffees and the preschool's opening celebration, Marcus realized he had fallen in love with her. The realization terrified him. Sarah and David had developed a close bond through their shared hardships. Though they maintained separate bedrooms in the apartment and never displayed romantic affection, Marcus assumed they were a couple, or at least heading in that direction. Ethan clearly adored them both, and they functioned as a family unit. Marcus began to withdraw, making excuses to miss their weekly dinners, sending his assistant to check on the preschool rather than visiting himself. The distance was painful but seemed necessary. He threw himself back into work, expanded his charitable giving, even reluctantly began dating again at his sister's insistence. It was David who finally confronted him, appearing unannounced at his office one afternoon. "You're avoiding us," he stated without preamble. "Ethan thinks he did something wrong." Guilt washed over Marcus. "Of course he didn't. I've just been busy." David's expression made it clear he wasn't buying the excuse. "Sarah misses you." "We all do. You and Sarah seem happy," Marcus said carefully. "I don't want to intrude on your family." David stared at him for a long moment before bursting into laughter. "You think Sarah and I are together, romantically, aren't you?" "No." David shook his head, still chuckling. "Sarah's like a sister to me. She stayed for Ethan when his mother left, and I'll always be grateful for that. But there's never been anything romantic between us." "Oh," Marcus said, feeling both relieved and foolish. "She cares about you," David continued, serious now. "And based on how miserable you look, I'd say the feeling's mutual." That evening, Marcus drove to their apartment building, rehearsing what he might say. But when Sarah opened the door, surprise and pleasure lighting her face, words failed him. "Marcus, we've missed you," she said, stepping back to let him in. Ethan barreled down the hallway, launching himself into a hug that nearly knocked Marcus over. "You came back? Dad said you would." Over Ethan's head, Marcus met Sarah's eyes. Something passed between them, understanding, possibility, hope. Their relationship developed slowly, respectfully. Marcus was conscious of the power imbalance their different financial situations created and worked to ensure Sarah never felt indebted or obligated. Sarah, for her part, remained fiercely independent, insisting on contributing equally to their dates, even when it meant simple picnics in the park rather than fine dining. David supported their relationship wholeheartedly, often volunteering to watch Ethan so they could have time alone. The boy himself seemed delighted by the development, especially when it meant more frequent visits to Marcus's pool. A year after that rainy night under the bridge, Marcus sold his penthouse and purchased a house with a yard in a neighborhood halfway between his office and Sarah's preschool. It had 4 bedrooms, one for him, one for Sarah, one for Ethan during his frequent stays, and one for David when he visited, which was often. The house became the home Marcus had never really had, filled with laughter, occasional arguments, compromise, and deep, abiding love. The family they created wasn't traditional, but it was theirs, forged through hardship and chance and choice. On a clear summer evening, Marcus proposed to Sarah in the garden they'd planted together. She accepted with tears and laughter, and that night, as they celebrated with David and Ethan, Marcus reflected on the strange path that had led them here. "If I hadn't taken that wrong turn," he mused, "if you hadn't been under that particular bridge, if Ethan hadn't gotten sick," Sarah added softly, "if you hadn't been brave enough to help strangers." David continued, "Ethan, now 9 and thriving, looked between the adults with the wisdom children sometimes possess. It wasn't wrong," he declared confidently. "The turn, it was exactly right." Marcus smiled, recognizing the truth in the boy's words. Sometimes life's wrong turns lead exactly where we need to go. Sometimes the darkest moments, a child's illness, the loss of a home, the emptiness of success without connection, contain the seeds of our greatest joys. Their wedding was small but joyful, held in the preschool garden Sarah had created. David served as best man, Ethan as ring bearer. The guests included families from the preschool, colleagues from Marcus's company, and several former residents of the bridge who had found their way to bright beginnings through outreach programs Sarah had established. In his vows, Marcus spoke of bridges, not just the physical structure where they'd met, but the metaphorical ones they'd built between their different worlds, between past hardships and future possibilities, between what was broken and what could be healed. 5 years after that rainy night, their family had expanded. Sarah and Marcus welcomed a daughter, whom they named Hope. David, now the facilities director for Marcus's entire real estate portfolio, had found love with a teacher from the preschool. Ethan, entering adolescence, showed promise as both a student and an athlete, his early hardships giving him empathy and resilience beyond his years. The bridge where they'd met became the site of a new initiative, a comprehensive resource center for families experiencing housing insecurity. The center provided temporary shelter, job training, childcare, and healthcare coordination, all designed to address the complex factors that lead to and perpetuate homelessness. On the 5th anniversary of their meeting, the family visited the bridge together. The area had been transformed, the muddy slope replaced by a landscaped path, the dark underside now brightened by murals created by local artists and children from Sarah's preschool. As they stood together, watching Hope toddle along the path with Ethan carefully guiding her steps, Sarah leaned against Marcus's shoulder. "From tragedy to miracle," she murmured, echoing the phrase Marcus had used in his wedding vows. The tragedy was real, Marcus acknowledged, thinking of the suffering they'd each experienced in different ways. But so is the miracle. The miracle wasn't just their love story, though that remained a daily source of wonder. It wasn't just their blended family, though that brought immeasurable joy. The true miracle was the ripple effect their connection had created, the lives touched through the preschool, the families supported by the resource center, the community strengthened by their example of what becomes possible when we truly see each other across the divides of circumstance. As the sun set behind the